now. So
All
we're
right,
good, Jim.
everybody. Yeah, Dr. Seigler here. So, with Dr. Rakowski, and I met you a long time ago. You probably don't remember me, but you were actually teaching a seminar, and you've taught like 10,000 hours worth. So I was gonna say I've probably been to about 10,000 hours worth. So if you kind of flip it around, there you go, right? Um, no, but you've been doing a lot of really teaching doctors and stuff for like 26 years now, right?
Yep.
And that's really tremendous because I say I've only been doing it 7, and it's weird, even in that short amount of time, the difference between the quality of people's brains, even from then to now, is like, it's alarming actually, which is like, to me, the whole reason why we need to be doing this. It's because like the #1 killer in the UK is dementia now. So we might be living longer, but I don't think it's a good way to go out. And of course, we know like autism is raising at the same rate as Alzheimer's. So it's a lose-lose on both ends. So anyways, not to start all doom and gloom, but that's where we need to spread the message and get everything out. So I didn't want to steal your thunder or anything, but go ahead.
All right, wonderful. I appreciate the invite. And, I love the title, Save Your Brain, Save Your Life. And you're right, we start out with brains that are literally being attacked in utero. And if we don't make the appropriate lifestyle changes, they get attacked all the way through until literally the brain dies before our body. And, when you look at polls around the world, up to the age 55, the top fear in the world is cancer. After the age of 55, it's just what we're talking about, losing your brain before your body wears out. And so I had the privilege of co-lecturing at a conference with this gentleman, Dr. Dale Bredesen. And I'm going to actually share a handful of his slides because he gave them to all of us as he published his work on the end of Alzheimer's. And his book is worth getting. I'll plug it. But long and short of it is what Dr. Bredesen says is, if we pay more attention, we can prevent this for a very, very, very long period of time. So for a long time, people have said, look, if we all live long enough, we're going to have one of two issues, either some type of hormonal related cancer or some type of neurodegeneration. And I tell people, well, okay, cool. Why don't we just push that out till we're about 150 years old? And then we can at least enjoy the first 149 years as we should. And by then we'll know more and we can make it longer if possible, right? But I'm only half facetious about that. We should be able to create a healthy brain and body for as long as we plan to be here. And so I really love this slide that Dr. Bredesen showed. He says, I'm literally going to try to throw in 30 years of research down into 20 minutes. And so guys like you and I, we take his work and we blend it with many of our other great mentors. We add our own little spin on it, and then we put it in clinical practice and we actually help people get better. So here's what I think is the most important thing that we're going to share. And another one of Dr. Bredesen's slides, he says, look, we've now found at least 36 risk factors for Alzheimer's. And he was talking about the top Alzheimer's drug. He says, given an Alzheimer's patient, the drug is like plugging one hole in a roof that has 36 holes. Now, as we're going to talk about, not 36 holes, but the three major things, the three big holes that are going to contribute to the other 33 combined, because that's very manageable. Since he's a hard scientist, here's, by the way, his group is called the Buck Institute, if anybody wants to look that up. But he said, we've done enough brain scans right now that we can tell that physically the brain shrinks. Functionally, the brain is destroyed. In terms of circulation, it's tremendously compromised. So I'll show a picture later of a brain and then another brain that has something called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. But he did a really nice job, Dale Bredesen did, Dr. Bredesen, in saying, look, things in our body are always remodeling. So depending on the audience that's watching this, when we're laying down new bone, we literally call that osteoblastic activity. When we're remodeling or breaking down bone, we call that osteoclastic. And in our building years, the building activity is actually going to exceed the breakdown. Now, as we pass beyond 30, is what most people say, then the breakdown starts happening a little faster than the building. But what we want to do is build as much as possible and maintain it for as long as possible so we don't have to give in to osteoporosis. Cancer, right, we have a balance of cells that are reproducing and cells that are being taken up. It's known that cancer is a process where we build more than we break down, and these cells actually are dysfunctional in a number of ways. But what he said with Alzheimer's is the connections in our brain suddenly are being broken down faster than we're putting them together. So we start losing types of memory. So I thought his description of the process is something that hopefully most people can relate to. And then now let's talk about how we prevent it or overcome it. So he said that literally there are three major factors that are into play that set up all 36 holes in the ceiling. So number one is actually going to be the toxins in our environment. And there are some toxics that are really profound to the central nervous system. The inflammatory process, and we'll show what can happen to the brain under a chronically inflamed circumstance. And then we actually lose nerve growth factors. And interestingly enough, the same thing that we need to grow our brain, we also need to grow our body. So I simplistically explain that as the Magnificent Seven. We've got to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right every single day. But especially thinking and meditation, we know is fantastic for easing the brain. Unplugging from our world is fantastic as well. But let's go through these things one by one. So when we start looking at our toxic world, here is a known fact. There are at least 80,000 registered toxic chemicals in our environment. And by the way, very few of these chemicals have ever been studied in combination. If they're going to study toxicity, they study one at a time. But by the time you add two, it's a little different, or three, it's a little different, or four, it's a little different. And then it gets real scary because our own Environmental Protection Agency has been doing what they call the Human Toxin Inventory since 1971. They've taken fat samples from cadavers and surgical patients, and they estimate every human being walking around has at least 700 toxins in their system at all times. New studies show that every single infant born is literally exposed to more than 200 toxins before they take their first breath. And you did a nice job in the intro talking about autism, but I'm certainly older than you are, but I go back just 50 something years, and we didn't have any knowledge at all of autism. The incidence was something about 1 in 10,000. And now we know the male brain is different than the female brain, but if a baby boy is born tomorrow, by his third birthday at the current rate, 1 in 42 of those boys will be defined autistic by their third birthday. So it's a little bit scary.
If you actually, I was seeing, and I'd have to double check, but they were saying in New Jersey was the highest rate at 1 in 24 males or something like that. It was in the 20s. And
wow.
And I was like, please don't let that be right. It's just so common now.
Let me give you a little scary factoid on that too. I literally have parents coming in wanting their child to be diagnosed with autism so they get expanded benefits in terms of sick care. So there's a whole dynamic going on there. But the reality is indisputable that our children are suffering brain damage, and oftentimes in utero, and there's a big problem. So when we start talking about toxins, I really like a guy named Paul Stamets, who literally wrote the book on what we're talking about here, medicinal plants, medicinal mushrooms. And literally, he has a TED Talk entitled 6 Ways That Mushrooms Will Save the World. But he said one thing that they do is they actually clear harmful pollutants from the environment. And here's a peer-reviewed medical study that says the exact same thing. So I like this metaphor because our body is mostly water. And in fact, our brain is the most hydrated tissue that we have. And so what I tell people, if you're very, very neglectful to your swimming pool,